Yeah, we are live. It's Friday. It's 2:25, way before 7. That's still good. We never know what's going to happen, so you got to get on as many times as we can. I was not on last night. Actually, my lovely wife and I were celebrating our, you can't always do it on the right day, but celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary, which is awesome. Love of my life. She's 27 different kinds of awesome. But today I want to talk about something on the supercharger stuff. So what I want to do is I'd like to see an actual direct comparison between these M90s. I know we're going down the M90 rabbit hole, and I talked to the guys at Jokers, and they're in to help do supporting. And so now we're going to put a bigger inlet, and just all it's gone, like what happens when people say, hey, look, I just want to do this modification. They're like, it'd be good if I also did this and this one over here and all this. And that's what's happened now with this. So now it's turned into something that it didn't start out being, but it's going to be good, and it'll be, the most powerful M90 ever created or something. I don't know. We'll see. But at any rate, what I want to talk about is what I wanted to see, and I haven't seen it online. And if you do see it, it's always something else that they've changed as well. So we want to talk about that side. So what I'm thinking about is doing a direct comparison between the two M90 superchargers, the two that you're most likely to find in the wrecking yard. There are other variants of this. And yes, we can put bigger ones. We can put 112s and 122s, and we could go to 2650 or these 4 or 5 liter twin screws or whatever, and our 1471s. I know we could do all that. We put 2 of them on there. We could do all that, but that's a discussion for another day. Right now, what I want to see is what I want to talk about tonight is a comparison between the two superchargers. So we have lots and lots of the M90s available, and I think more from the L67 stuff than the L32 stuff. I see more L67s in the wrecking yards than I see L32s. We do see some of the even earlier ones with the little M62 blowers instead of the M90s, but there's lots of the M90s available. And so it makes it good to try to put boost in some of these things. So we want to apply this M90 to a variety of different things. So we'll try that. So what I'm going to do basically is raise the price of the M90. So you guys should go buy about 20 or 30 of them right now, or 100 of them, because that's probably going to happen, as has happened in the past when we've done lots of these videos and shown people, hey, look, you can make power if you put this on there. But my question is, for today anyway, we want to talk about directly comparing M90 versus M90. So we want to do a Gen 3 versus a Gen 5. So the question is, there are a couple of differences that we need to talk about. And this comes into play as much as, hey, we want to see the difference between these, as how do we actually go about testing these? I'll tell you what I'm talking about. The thumbnail photo is the mass air meter / throttle body section of an L67. So these are the earlier blowers before they upgraded to the Gen 5 blower, when they went from the 240 horse motor to the 260 horsepower motor. The earlier, the Gen 3 superchargers that they used, when they were running that motor, the throttle body and the mass air meter were one unit. So they were combined together. One of the problems, or one of the hurdles that we need to overcome if we're directly comparing these, is the throttle body size. Now, this isn't a huge obstacle, because honestly, I think if you're comparing these, you have to compare them with the throttle body size that came with that blower. Primarily because if it was just a situation where the throttle body and mass air meter were one size, but the throttle opening was consistent in the two blowers, that would be okay. Then you just put the right size throttle body on there, and away you go and compare them, and then you're good. But that's not the situation. The situation is, not only is the throttle body different size, in one case on the L67, we have, I think, a 70 millimeter, and then on the Gen 5, we have a 75 millimeter. But so both the throttle opening, the flange in the blower, is that size, and then the throttle body itself is also that size. So if we're comparing these, we have to compare these with different size throttle bodies. And so we're going to come back and talk about that in a minute. But the other thing is the lower intake manifold itself. When they went to the Gen 5 blower, not only did they make a bigger inlet going into that blower, but the discharge is different. It's also bigger. So it has to rely on a different intake manifold. So you have, if you're doing an upgrade or doing a comparison between a Gen 5 and a Gen 3, essentially you're changing 3 things. Now, they all shared the same pulley, at least from the factory, and that's a pretty easy thing to change anyway, but they all shared the same 3.8-inch pulley. So if you're taking one of the L67 setups off and putting on the L32 stuff, you have to change the lower manifold, the blower, and the throttle body, and then run it that way. For us, the mass air meter doesn't really come into play because we're running a standalone management system and we're dialing everything in. So that's not going to be an issue. So my question to you guys is that the way it should be tested? I mean, I think, and I need to look at this to be sure, that I think we can run the same lower manifold on these blowers, because I think we can run the Gen 5 blower with the or the Gen 5 lower manifold with the Gen 3 blower. Some of it is just going to be open. I don't think it uncovers anything that's going to cause a leak. We're just going to have more flow, not more flow, because the discharge coming out of the blower is smaller sized anyway. But I think that's going to just at least facilitate an easier swap. Then all we have to do is take the blower and the throttle body assembly, take one off and put the other one on. They all line up the same. So that's for us. That for we don't have to put it in a car. We don't have to hook up the mass air meters and all that stuff. So for us, it's a fairly simple swap. So if we can do that without changing the intake manifold, that would be much easier. A lower intake manifold, again, not an insurmountable thing. We could change that fairly easily too. So, but my question is, when you're changing the blower, and in this instance, you're doing a back-to-back test comparing the blowers, what percentage of it might be the intake manifold? What percentage of it might be just the blower, the blower efficiency? And then what percentage of it might be the bigger throttle body inlet size? So we know that on these positive displacement superchargers, particularly the EATONs or the Whipples or the Kenny Bells or any sort of positive displacement supercharger, the opening going into the blower is a critical element in the boost and the power and the airflow coming out of the blower. So the bigger that is, the happier the blower is. So a bigger one is going to make more power right away. So what would happen if we just made the throttle inlet and the throttle body 75 millimeters on the Gen 3 blower? Is that enough to overcome well, first of all, we have to backtrack a little bit, and we have to assume that if we ran the Gen 5 blower, that it's going to make more power than the Gen 3 blower, the assembly, the intake manifold, the blower, and the throttle body. One of them is going to make more power than the other. If we assume the Gen 5 blower is better, that setup is better, and it makes more power, which one of those elements helped it make more power? Was it the big throttle body opening? We know that helps. But at the speed that they're spinning that blower and at the power output that they're running for that supercharger, is the throttle body a big restriction in that? So let me know in the comments what you guys think. Is that throttle body a big restriction? Like if we took an M90 L67 blower, the Gen 3 blower, and open up the throttle, open that up to 75 millimeters, and then put some sort of 75 millimeter throttle body on there, would we pick up power spinning at the same speed and using the factory lower manifold? Then would we pick up power going to the L32 manifold? And then finally, do we pick up power if both of those things are optimized? Do we pick up power just changing the supercharger itself, going to the Gen 5 blower? And if there are changes for each one of those things, what percentage is it? Is most of it the throttle body? Is most of it the blower? Is most of it the lower manifold? Let me know what you guys think. And this is important. This is one of the problems when you do testing. And this comes about, because I've been testing my whole life and this is how I have to view it. But also there were a lot of comments about the video that I did when we ran the NA motor and then installed the blower. They're like, yeah, but you didn't run the alternator with the blower. I'm like, yeah, but spinning an alternator is maybe 1 or 2 horsepower. It's not very much. But it's still something that's different and something that somebody can point out and they get to be right and they get to complain about it. And so they feel better about themselves and all that. But it is true. If you're going to look at testing this stuff, you have to look at these little things. And that's why we're talking about the throttle body and the blower and the intake manifold, because all those things are going to change if we do this. And so again, which one of those is it? And then if you ask people that and point that out in a video, you will get a variety of different answers, obviously. And now on the 4.8, if we put an L67 blower on there, and run it, run it with the same. Let's say we ran it with a 3.8 pulley. I have some sitting around that just have stock pulleys on them. We could just run that and run the 3.8 pulley and optimize both of them, and then just do a blower swap and then put them on there and go, hey, look, it did this. That kind of would be interesting, and it would tell people. It would also tell people, and this would show a greater power gain because we're testing it on a motor that makes way more power. I mean, the motor itself is already making 375 or 400 horsepower or whatever our NA motor is making now, depending on how we configure it. And so it's asking the blower to flow a lot of air. On a 260 horsepower V6, it's not, I mean, it would be about 300 the way that we're running it, but we're not asking it to flow nearly as much air. So the difference that you get in that situation, again, our test motor is going to dictate also what happens. It helps dictate what's going to happen for the test. It's going to not all but dictate, but it's going to help dictate the results of the test. Because if you test an intake manifold that's not restrictive or a camshaft that's not overly big, on a mild combination in or cylinder heads where the motor doesn't need the flow, all of these things affect the ultimate outcome of a comparison, because it may not have needed the thing that you were changing would have added. It wasn't in a position to take advantage of that. And the supercharger test is a good example of that. If we test it on a motor that doesn't need a bunch more flow, we're not going to see that much of a power gain. If we test it on a motor that could utilize all that flow, then we could see a big power gain. And then the same thing for the throttle bodies, the mass air meters, and all that stuff. So testing them on something that can utilize that flow, I think ultimately gives us a better idea. We might then go back and test it on something that doesn't need the flow and go, okay, look, we got bookends. We have this much of a gain, sort of a minimal gain on something that doesn't need the power. And then we have over here, we have a lot of gain because we have something that really needs the power. But it tells us that the new combination can supply that extra power if we saw power gain. So hopefully that's not too confusing. So we got to have a poll going on here for Friday. It's Friday night. Is the bigger throttle body how can I miss it by one letter? Okay, I won't put the question mark at the end, but trust me, I know punctuation. Is the bigger throttle body responsible for more than 50% of the gain offered by the Gen 5 blower swap? So in the blower swap, if we substitute the L32 blower assembly for the L67 blower assembly and we gain power, is the throttle body responsible for at least or more than 50%? So let me know what you guys think. I'll scroll back. Boost, what's up? Burnsy, congrats on the 25 years. Yep. Can't wait to see the comparison. Actually, our anniversary was 20 years. We've been together for 24 though. I'm just glad you found a way to make it all work. This is off topic, but is there a difference in power on a Truck Norris cam NSR versus Truck Norris cam with the upgraded springs? Yeah, that video is up already. You could take a look. I already did Truck Norris versus Truck Norris NSR. It wasn't a lot. It was 6 or 7 horsepower. The L67 throttle body from thumbnail is a 97, 98. The 99 is better. Yeah, that is a better throttle body. 01 plus North Star is the common upgrade. Is the lower the only difference in the blower generations? Brendan, what do you mean? You'll be able to rev a little more without going into valve float, but as far as horsepower and torque, not really. Going well, just grinding away and trying to get some of these out of my way. Sean, Richard, YouTube is creepy. After yesterday asking you about nitrous, the algorithm gave me an Engine Masters video with you in it. If you think that that what's her name? Alexa isn't listening there or listening. I expect that at a stock drive speed, there is less than 20 horsepower, probably less than 10 from each other. Higher drive speeds, different story. Oh, between the M90s. I mean, sometimes you'll notice a little more up top because the valves are more control and close and stay closed, but it's pretty minor on that cam. Probably not noticeable. One of the things I'm going to do in the continued M90 testing on this 4.8 is it's going to get valve springs. And it's probably also going to get a bigger camshaft, but not before we run it again with this camshaft. And I'm probably going to do something to those cylinder heads because I want to get rid of the potential breakage issues associated with those two 706 heads. Do you have any videos for us that are barely wanting to learn? So what are you're not wanting to learn anything? So you just want like entertainment videos? How much bigger was what throttle body? The difference between the two superchargers is 5 millimeters. Connected, the inlet is larger with the Gen 5 versus the Gen 3. Yes, the throttle opening size is bigger on the Gen 5. %. Is the opening 25 to 30% bigger? No, it's not. It's 5 millimeters. So very little, less than 10%. Can you also you can also use an LS4 throttle body, bolts directly, but need to plug the lower holes. Yeah, we got no problem with that. One of the things I'm thinking about is eliminating the internal blow off valve and having an external one, just so that we could port it more. Alexa isn't listening because I don't have it. I'm not paying for my house to be wiretapped. Do you have a phone next to you? Because she's listening. And she is a air quote. She obviously the North Star throttle body is common on the Gen 5. Yeah, because it's easy. Yeah, you got to ditch the dry bar wire throttle body. Now that the North Star thing has been used a lot and for a long time, and I think that Mark has a North Star still sitting in the back of his truck that I maybe could run if it's not full of water by now. I haven't been rained on for a couple of seasons, but maybe it has the mechanical throttle body on it. I'll have to take a look and see. But I'm just cutting all that off anyways, and we're gonna put a real throttle body on there. Maybe 2 of them, because 2 of them would be cool. $5 millimeters seems like it could be significant. It's more, and I think when guys have done the upgrades, because upgrading to the bigger throttle body, even on the L67 stuff, I mean, you should just upgrade the whole blower. But if you're just doing one thing, a bigger inlet definitely helps. We know that when we did ported versions of the early and late throttle bodies and mass air meters on the L67 stuff, when we did ported versions of those and bigger blades, we even had them, we used to machine them and put bigger throttle blades in them. It was definitely worth power. I don't know if it's 50%, but definitely a good bump. Yeah, the question is, if there's a power gain, is the throttle body the 50% of that gain, whatever, or is the blower itself the more efficient blower, the more efficient M90, case and stuff and discharge? And also, when I'm doing these blower upgrades, should I have the noise valve, the noise reliefs? Should I fill those? Immediately ask how you feel about drive-by-wire. What about the BMW engines that don't have throttle bodies at all? I know they're just changing the aren't they just throttling them by how much they're opening and closing the valves? That's even more convoluted. I mean, it's awesome, definitely. And you've gotten rid of all the pumping losses, which should definitely help for fuel mileage, I think. But it still could be problematic. And I think BMW had the rotating intake manifold too to change the runner length, which is awesome. .75 millimeter is about 7% more flow section than the cable 70. Gonna have to attach my baling wire to the valves. That seems like a lot of baling wire for all the valves. I'm gonna be like the puppet master pulling all those. ZZP sold a plus 5 millimeter L67 throttle body, but they didn't sell well. The whole Gen 5 swap makes more power. That's why I voted no. Yeah, I think it's probably better, right? That's what I would do. I would upgrade the whole thing, but I still think even because the going to the North Star throttle body just allows you to go to a mechanical throttle body, right? It's not a bigger upgrade compared to the factory drive-by-wire throttle body on the Gen 5. They need an 80 or something. Quick tip, never put an Alexa in your bedroom, it pervs on you. What if you invited her? Is the throttle body responsible for more than 50% of the gain offered by a Gen 5 blower swap? 58 are saying yes. They're thinking the inlet. I'd kind of like to see, does anybody know if the rotor pack has changed between the Gen 3 and the Gen 5? Or is it the same rotor pack and just a housing change? I'm curious to see if you're going to try the M90 on a 5.3. We can. The thing that will make a difference, what will happen if you put a positive displacement blower and spin it the same on a 5.3 versus a 4.8, assuming that the way that you have them configured, the 5.3 makes more power, is the boost will come down at any given pulley ratio. Rotors are the same, possibly updated coating. In my situation, I need 103 millimeter throttle body to upgrade from 102 millimeter fast to 103 millimeter MSD. You said the MSD gives me a game, but I think I'll wait until I do nitrous. Is yours, I'm thinking yours must be an LS7 then, if I told you that the MSD is going to be better? Richard, I've been doing some research on expansion ratios to water to steam, 1700 to 1. Doing the math at a stoic ratio gasoline completely vaporized would displace 7.5% of the oxygen. If you're injecting water, is that what you're talking about? Also heard that the coating was updated. Coating is a common thing with OEM style blowers so that they can get them to seal better and then also get them to last with a change in heat. .427 LS3 with but LS7 headed deal, right? Yeah. Do you think there's any way to avoid that? To avoid that expansion ratio with water? I don't know how you're going to change that. You can get rid of that in terms of hurting the airflow by injecting the water methanol or water or whatever you want to inject directly into the combustion chamber, but that's hard to do. And Brian Tooley and I had a discussion about injecting something like right at the valve. So after the valve is open and injecting something right there. So does that displace the air? That was our discussion. Any benefits to putting a small turbo on a 4.8? Yes, there's a benefit to putting a turbo on anything. Now we can go to our live chat. 55% are saying yes. That's good. Good morning, Richard from Victor Harbor. Would the stand diameter throttle body be sufficient to turbo LS looking to make? Are you talking about the standard diameter like a stock throttle body? And yes, you can make 1,000 horsepower with any of the stock LS throttle bodies. There's a topic for future videos. Ceramic and low friction coatings, do they work? We know that they work. I don't know, like if you take pistons out and coat the skirts, we know that that works. I mean, they have them on factory pistons. The question is, is it a measurable amount of power? I think it helps the pistons last longer. Yeah, Chris, you can. The smallest factory throttle body that I know, although I don't know about the LS4, but all the truck throttle bodies are like 78 millimeters, and you can make a lot of power through a 78 millimeter throttle body. And then just make sure that you match your throttle body size to the inlet of your intake manifold, whatever you're using. But you can make a lot of power with that size. I think on our Honda stuff, that was 728 or something. I think that was only a 65 millimeter throttle body. But for Honda size, that was pretty big. That was a big boy Honda throttle body. They're probably doing 75s or 90s or something on them now. I'll try to find it, but it was a while ago now. I did test on my twin screw 3800 with two 75 millimeter throttle bodies, a log total airflow with just one open versus both. I did that on a low power application, small block Chevy with a 671 on it. And we ran one, it had two 750s on it. They may have even, I don't think they were 950s. I think they were 750s on this one. So we ran two 750 like blower carburetors on it from Holley, which worked very well, by the way. They just right out of the box, we put them on and they were perfect. And so we ran those, and then we ran just one of them, and it also worked. It also worked just fine. So yeah, you can do that. And what twin screw did you put on there? Long ago, back in 2000, I did a twin screw adapter plate for Kenny Bell on the 3800 V6, and we just ran a single throttle body on it, but because they already had the adapter for it to work. But yeah, the only reason I would want to do two of them, I mean, one big 105 millimeter throttle body is ultimately probably going to be what it is, but it would be cool to run two, like I call them ram's horns, around the front, just kind of parallel with the blower aiming forward. For one thing, that way from the dyno cell, I could see that both throttle bodies are opening up. It's two of them, because then you could put, two turbos feeding those, which is, twice the awesomeness. I'm curious what people are going to accomplish with the dual throttle bodies on the S650 Mustangs. That's probably more than enough. It's probably enough throttle body, certainly, to feed the motor. There are no bolt-on throttle bodies for the L67 or L32. They need adapters. Doesn't the L32 just have the throttle body? Isn't the mass air meter separate on the L32? I guess it's due to the blowing through rather than sucking through like a Whipple supercharged. Yeah, Chris, if you're think about the airflow rate of, like, if you measure the airflow rate of a throttle body by drawing through it, the throttle body is something, let's say it's a 78 millimeter, and let's say that's 900 CFM. If you're forcing air through it, all of a sudden the airflow rate could be a few thousand RPM. I mean, a few thousand CFM. So, the throttle body is not really a restriction. 102 millimeter throttle body have any gain on an L92? If the L92 has a stock intake manifold on it with a 90 millimeter throttle opening, probably not. And if it did, it would be very minimal. You're going to have to run an adapter. Otherwise, the 102 millimeter throttle body is going to overhang the edge of the opening in the factory manifold. I'd like to see horsepower torque numbers on the big block Chevy 290 versus a 300. Again, Rex, that would depend on what we tested on. For it to show good gains, if there is airflow difference between those two, to be able to get at those airflow gains, you'd have to have enough motor with enough camshaft, with enough lift, and more than just lift, but with enough power to utilize. If there's a 20 CFM difference between those two and you're testing those on a 500 horsepower small block, it's not going to do anything. But if you're trying to make 1,000 horsepower with a NA small block on those two heads, then that extra 20 CFM will really come into play. I don't mind using cheap Amazon parts for myself, but dealing with customer Amazon builds is a nightmare. Trying to sort out issues when you have to tell them that all the cheap electronics would need to be replaced. I agree. It's there's stuff that I do on my own things that are on the dyno, which is why I don't build things for people, that I'll do on those that I'm doing it. It's not right, but it's right now. And so it will get done the thing that I need to get done right now. It'll last all the dyno tests. The baling wire, drive-by-wire throttle body thing is a perfect example of that. So I get stuff that this will work for right now. I'll be able to make my pulls and I'll be able to get the data that I need. And then if we wanted it perfect later on, if it was going in a car, I'd do it differently. We swapped from a single throttle body in Plenum on a 4-cylinder 1.9 liter and gained 30 horsepower, which is fairly significant. We're only talking about, I don't know how you get, was whenever that single throttle body was, like really restrictive, because 30 horsepower, 188 horsepower is like a huge amount. I've never seen anything like that. Mass airflow is separate. Yeah, with the inlet tube. That's what I thought on the L32. Finally got my Whipple 1.2 liter. Nice. I'm going to adapt to my Jackson Racing manifold for the Focus. That'll be cool. Mark, are you incorporating a air-to-water intercooler on that? That's built into both L67 and L32. L32 and 67s have different bolt patterns. They both have mass air meters on them? So now I'm getting different things. Stay away from Amazon AN fittings. Just gotta route like the M45 and see what happens. Okay. That will be a much better blower. Every time we put on a twin screw, especially when you go to a larger twin screw compared to some sort of roots blower, it's usually pretty sizable gain. 45 millimeter single throttle body to 4 42 millimeter ITBs. Oh, okay. So you completely changed the manifold design then, right? So going to an IR manifold can definitely be worth power. Wish I could do ITBs on my C6. Yeah, it's hard to package if you're trying to do that in a Corvette. It almost has to be a cross ram. And then the guys at West Tech had a Corvette, an older Corvette with a big block that had a cross ram IR deal on it. The problem is it's grabbing all the air from right over the headers, and it's not a good deal. 57%. 5.7. So here's a question for you. This is one of the things I got a lot of comments on and questions about, and why I want to change this anyway, because I think it's a good idea, especially if because I want to put different cams in this 4.8. We want to try that because we want to try to maximize the NA power, which then makes the M90 blower look even better, because, that's nothing better than a 500 horsepower blower. If you put it on a 600 horsepower motor, then it makes more power. But we want to run bigger cams in it. So I'm definitely going to do a valve spring upgrade. And I'm wondering if that's going to help. Are we getting into valve float with a stock one? And we didn't get into it NA, it didn't seem like. But are we getting into there because we're adding a little bit of boost on the intake valve? I don't know. Richard, 307 build here. I can get some 68 heads with 70 cc's. They made a 1968 head that had a 70 cc chamber on it. 172, 1.5 valves. Skip and keep looking for vortex. Yeah, that does not sound like the heads that you'd want to put on there. I don't think that that's going to gain you very much. Does your 307 have dish pistons or something in it? We are going to try to do two of the M90s on there. I'm just going to build a doghouse thing. It's just plates and triangles. It's not it's not going to be terribly hard. And with the dual blower, we can add an intercooler also. And we're going to add an intercooler with a single blower as well. Compound supercharging. You mean two superchargers? Put the heads on it, heal it up with boost. Well, we are kind of doing that because I'm sure that those two cylinders that were running without valves operating are probably not ideal. Dish pistons. 300 series 2 Big Bang. Yeah, that should be coming before too long here. Two M90s are better than one M90. Yeah, definitely. Twice as good. Maybe more than that. So here's the question on the M90s. If we have one M90 making 8 pounds and we add another one with the same pulley, are we now going to make 16 pounds? Joe, no politics here. We don't care what side of the thing you're on. Would it just be 8 psi with more CFM? Let me know what you think. Will it make more than 16? I don't know. So tell me what you think. Worst part about 80s motors is even with lots of boost, they still make barely more than modern motors. Yeah, I mean, if you take a stock 5-liter Mustang engine that makes 250 horsepower or 260 horsepower the way that we run it, you're like, wow, we're a long ways from making something realistic. Richard, did you get my email about the oiling problem video? I don't think so. Let's see here. I don't see anything about an oiling problem. Anyone that I get, I answer. So if I would have gotten it, I definitely would have answered it. Try to be pretty good about that. Seems like air density might be more in that scenario. Richard, is your plan to lance off a few inches of each blower before the throttle flange and then weld on plus port it for 102 millimeter cable throttle body? Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut off the whole front throttle body flange. Maybe up to the. I need to look and see where the factory bypass valve, where that is relative to the opening, because I want to look in there and get a feel for what needs to happen inside there to make the porting better, because the guys from Jokers are going to port it, but there's more to the entry to making that work. So I want to look at that and see if I need to get more elaborate and get rid of that. Like I said, I'll just make an opening into the throttle back behind the throttle, the new throttle body, wherever we position it. And then we'll have a hole in the plate and have an external bypass like Kenny Bella's done and lots of people have done. It's pretty easy. I just wanted to try the nitrous puck mounted on the lower intake manifold, but spray CO2. Liquid dispersion in those LAMs is awful. Spraying anything pre-blower is useless. We've run nitrous on those before, and it obviously works. I don't know about distribution. We weren't measuring the O2 sensors. We didn't have 6 O2 sensors when we were doing that. And that was on the V6. I think it'd only be 12 pounds with 2 M90s because they'd be fighting each other. Your flow would increase. Let's see. Flow would increase, but your pressure would max out at more like 1 bar. I'll have to check my math on that. It won't make 16. Heat, etc. would affect it. Actually, Neil, if we're increasing the heat, it'd be more likely to make more boost because that's what happens. That's what pressure is. Richard, just wondering, would it be possible to run adapters off the M90s to run carburetors? Yeah, you can make an elbow, and I want to do that too. And there's probably a stretch would be cool. I do want to try that. In fact, I probably will try that on my next trip down. I can just put a different blower on there because I don't have to run a blower that has like all of the boost. I have another Gen 5 M90 that has a 3.2 pulley on it, and I can make an adapter going to that and a flange coming up for a carburetor, and that would be cool. Can we have a temp sensor in the doghouse? Oh, you want me to measure charge temperature after the blower? Is that what you're talking about? You sent it back on October 17th. How am I supposed to look way back then? Okay, let's go back to October 17th. October 17th. Let's see. No, that's a gearing question. That's a 3,800 parts request. I have 3 on October 17th. I can look in trash, I guess, or spam. Spam a lot. I have a lot of spams. Vern, small block Chevy 289 oiling issues. Okay, it's in my spam. I see you use the word thoughts in your question. That's probably why it's in the spam. My first comment would be I've never used the Morel link bar lifters. Is the band for the oiling coming out of the thing that I would check is I would rotate the camshaft and see if the band for the oiling on the lifters is coming uncovered and see if that's your problem. Because the level for those might not be exactly even, so it might only be happening on 1 or 2 of them. I would check that. And if it's all one side, I would need to look at the oiling for that block and see, but there's got to be a crossover. You've got a leak on that one side that could be a lifter or it could be a leak at the crossover. Number 1 seems normal, but at cylinder, okay, so it's at cylinder 2. It's like a faucet zone. The oil is gushing out. It doesn't seem to be getting very much oiling. Yeah, check if the lifter band is coming uncovered, basically, and allowing oil to bleed out. Or check the bore in that versus that lifter size, and see if that lifter, if one of them is wrong, either the lifter is undersized or the bore is oversized. What's different between the Gen 3 and Gen 5 M90 inlets? The size of them is 5 millimeters different. Yeah, John, you could pick up another one. There's a guy who has done 2 M90s on a Ford V8 already. Mount a Gen 3 and Gen 5 on the dual blower doghouse. I bet outlet temps are lower on the blower with the larger outlet. So you want one of the openings in the thing to be smaller? Temps after the blower. Yeah, Sean, I should have done that in this last test. I should have monitored inlet temps or discharge temps to find out what, you know. Is Joker's going to block the silence reports? I didn't ask them about that. What about trying an intercooler? We're definitely going to do that. We already have that done. Tom Demuse from Demuse Engineering already has an intercooler. In fact, we ran it on the LS already. Is there a Matchbox equivalent for blowers? EATON has information up on their blowers. Of course, you'd have a spam rule looking for the word thoughts. I know. That's my programming. 20 years ago, didn't the company make blower kits for Hondas and Mazdas? Yeah, Jackson Racing did. M90 was on the Ford Super Coupes. What CFM is 5 millimeters worth? It's there's more to it than that, because the two throttle bodies themselves are dramatically different. So one isn't just a 5 millimeter bigger opening of the other one. They are different. I don't know if I didn't look online to see if somebody had the flow rates of the two throttle bodies, like if they've actually flowed them on a bench. It would be interesting. M90s are heat pumps. Yeah, they're just air pumps. I don't suspect. I mean, we had a lot of people talking about the fact that we were running these things at 18,700 RPM with the 2.6 pulley on. Oh yeah, the temperature is going to be hot. Well, I know that that's a normal statement, because most people running a 2.6 pulley on a 3800 are the boost is probably in the teens, maybe 20 pounds, and it would be very hot there. But if you're running that speed and it's only 8 pounds, I guarantee you the temperature is going to be lower at 8 pounds than it is at 20 pounds. Now, it might be higher than it would be, with a good compressor, running that kind of speed, like a twin screw or something, which it would be lower anyways. But at 8 pounds, it's definitely going to be lower than it would be at twice that. Vern, what you should do is take the intake manifold off, and without the motor running, take the distributor out and spin the oil pump with a shaft, and then you can look and see, and try switching the lifters from one to another, from one side to the other, or one group of two to another, and see what happens. If it's constantly in that one, then there's something going on with the height of that or the bore diameter. So that's how I would look at it. They should port all the way out and include silencer ports in the outlet. So the silencer ports should not be ported. They should just be closed. At least that's the information that I got from the guys at EATON. A guy in LS1 Tech did one on a 3.8 Camaro as well, but it was definitely I did this while very drunk. 75 millimeter diameter is 5% increase in area over 70 millimeter. Question is, how do you equate that CFM to flow? You can't. There's no way that you can get a direct correlation. You can get a correlation in an increase in diameter and area and flow if you have all that data. And then you can go, okay, if all of these variables were the same, we normally get this kind of increase going from a 70 to a 75. We get this amount. But if you now have changed the shape of the thing that you're testing, and you also have that change, you really need to test it. Blade size and pitch. Yeah, like I said, the whole shape of the throttle body is completely different. And S478 to an S488 turbo is the same size compressor wheel, just a bigger inlet. A 478 and a 488 have the same compressor wheel on them? Would you try an MPX case from Magnum? Is that the case that they use on the 4.6 stuff? I think the point of diminishing returns is before 2.7. It was 15 PSI for me. 255 was a tenth slower. 16 PSI, ran my best time in a 3,000 pound Fiero. So Corin, how unhappy are you about running an 11.0 instead of a 1099? If I'm not mistaken, I read the 3800 Supercharger guys were adapting the LS4 throttle body. Somebody mentioned that earlier, that I haven't seen that. I don't think I've seen that stock throttle body, because I think the intake manifold that I tested when I did that comparison, I don't think it had a throttle body on it. It still broke the records. Nice. That's good. I know, even even at 1099 with a 9, right? But that's how racing treats people. It does that to you. That's cool that you broke the record. That's fast. 11.0 Fiero. That's a good mile an hour too. What's this 60 foot on that? They're doing 137 on low boost now with a turbo. Yes. It's nice, huh? Being able to have that. Old supercharged 60 foot was 150. Okay. Can you take over the Duramax testing for Banks? It's going so good, and then he just quit. Nah, Banks does good stuff, man. And he's already forgotten way more about diesel stuff than I'll ever know. I have done very little testing on diesel stuff. Very little. So we're going to close out our poll at 53%. Going to end our poll, and we're ending. Banks has been doing it a lot of years. I still have books that he did. He's been doing turbo stuff for a long time. He knows his stuff. Yeah, Vern, I answered your thing, so. The MPX case, so let's take a look at that. MPX M90 Magnum Power Extreme. see what that looks like. Strong. It has larger intake and exhaust port duration than the M90, allowing the supercharger to be spun much faster without losing volumetric efficiency. In addition to the stronger 356 T6 material, thicker walls. It's good because case distortion is a real thing. Stiffening boss run through the full length, creating a very stiff case that will not flex under load. Since cases and new casting, there's no reason to send your M90 to Magna Power to have it ported. Simply order the case, install your rotors, fill it with supercharger fluid, and have fun. Yeah, I think it might be an interesting test. Maybe I'll reach out to those guys and see what happens. I wonder what inlet there bolts onto that. Do you have to make your own like throttle adapter and stuff? Or is that for, that says for T-Bird supercharged super coupe? I don't know. It'd be interesting to try. How much can you open the inlet of Gen 5 supercharger? Well, we're hoping to go to 105 millimeters. Martin, we made how much can you open the inlet of Gen 5 supercharger? Maybe 90 millimeters. Also based on the LS test with the M90, seems like the M90 performed better on the LS versus the 3800. It does because it was a much more powerful NA motor, so that's not unusual. It should work exactly like that. Because we're starting out with a more powerful, bigger motor kind of. But on the inlet side, we're cutting the front of that supercharger off. The whole throttle assembly is coming off, and then we're going to put a much bigger one on. Diesel tuning is easy compared to petrol. Yeah, the tuning part of it, I don't think would be an issue, especially with as little tuning as I have to do on wide open throttle stuff. Does Gen 3 F-Body 2.8 or 3.1 V6 have any reasonably priced power upgrades? I don't think so. I need to look and even see if cams are available for them. I mean, I know that there's always reground cams, and you could hand port the heads, and you obviously could put boost on it, which we've done before. I've done 3100 V6s with a turbo. What makes old supercharger oil smell like? It does. It smells like gear oil. It's terrible. Super coupe blower is upside down. That's right, huh? Because it blows up into the intercooler. That would make it superior to the 3800 because it is intercooled. I saw a couple of those at the wrecking yard. James and Al with the twin engine Olds is exactly what you're talking about. Hack the front of the M90 off. Yeah, it's just aluminum welding. I mean, you just cut it off on a bandsaw at a position where if you squinch down on a 4-inch tube, then you have a flange on the front of it. What I might do is, just so that the Jokers guys can get to it, I might just put a short section of 4-inch tubing on it, just a standoff, if you will. And that way they can get in and port it easier. And then I can attach whatever I want to the other side of it. So I could even go up in throttle body size. I could put 125 millimeter on there. Not that that's probably going to do anything on the 4-inch opening, but I could put a dual throttle body on it again because it would look cool, and a polished one. I remember Kenny Bell did one of those long ago, and it was pretty cool. I have all those parts on a shelf, just no blower, top hat, hot side pipes and the front mount intercooler. There was 2 of those in the wrecking yard, and I wanted to grab all of them because they look really cool. I especially wanted the intercooler. Just, you know, it's always good to have an intercooler. Okay, assuming we're using dual M90s mounted in parallel, we in theory would produce roughly twice the flow per RPM. That's right. You're thinking right. But the RPM power band would stay the same. It would. It's just the power band where the motor makes power is going to stay consistent. All we're going to do is raise the amount of airflow that we're supplying to the motor at any given point, just like turning the boost up on a turbo does. Performance used a twisted rotor blower on a small block Chevy and apparently was blowing the fuel to the back of the intake. A twisted rotor blower? So is that a TVS or is that a twin screw? Is a T76 a good turbo for 1,000 horsepower on a 6-liter LS, or is that pushing the turbo too much? You have to make sure that whatever T76 you're getting, if you're getting one from like an offshore T76, it's not going to support 1,000 horsepower. There are 76 millimeter turbos that will do 1,000 horsepower, but they're good ones. And 1,000 horsepower is going to, well, not a Precision or something good, or a real Garrett or some of the Borg Warner stuff. I was way too busy fixing other people's stuff instead of my own. That's why my Comet isn't running yet. Should have been running 2 months ago. So 3 M90s. Yeah, 3 M90s is more. It's just another one of these. It's interesting that on the, and maybe I should do a comparison video, but on the 3800 V6, we made 450 horsepower with the blower running with this pulley. Although can somebody tell me, Corin, you might know, what is the diameter of the lower of the crank pulley on the 3800? What's the crank pulley size? Because I think that the 3800 crank pulley is smaller than the LS truck pulley is. So we were actually spinning the blower faster on the V8 than we were on the V6. I think you're running into a back pressure problem with a 6-liter on a T76. You can run that T6 S475 that Summit sells, that's a Borg Warner that everybody sells. You can make 1,000 horsepower flywheel with that on a 6-liter. It's got a big enough hot side where that's not going to be a problem. But an S480 or an S485 would be comfortably into the 4-digit range. Twin turbo or single doesn't matter. It wouldn't make any difference as long as you size the turbos for the power output that you want. I want to say it's a pinch over 7 inches. Why do you excessive? Why do you want to put M90s on a flow bench? I don't know the lower pulley size. I bet it's larger than LS. It's not. I know that it's going to be smaller than a I know the 3800 is going to be smaller. At least I think it is than the truck pulley. The truck one is 7.5. I have it written down somewhere. We'll try to be on tonight. We'll see what happens. Fuel setup, run big injectors in it. And are you running E85? What kind of fuel are you running? Burns, I don't think it's going to be, it's not going to be anywhere near 8 inches. I don't think. I tried looking it up. L67. There's lots of pictures of the pulleys. But I don't see any. And I even did my search for crank pulleys. But all that comes up are the blower pulley upgrades that they're doing. Yeah, they're not showing it. That somebody would have measured it. I'm obviously going to put that information up there, so when somebody searches this, they come up with. It read 6.94, so 7 inches. So it is a little bit. If that's accurate, then it is a little bit smaller than the truck pulley. I'd like to be able to get a hold of you. That's why we do this live feed, so you can ask whatever questions you want. If the 3100 and 3800 are the same, I don't know if they are, John. I don't know about the 3100. Ace Racing sells 5% over 185 millimeter. 185 divided by 4 equals. That's saying it's set. That's 7.25 times 0.95. Yeah, 6.91. So yeah, just a hair under 7 inches. I did that the other way around, yeah. LS, you actually have to talk to somebody else about fuel pumps. I don't know about in chassis fuel pumps. I don't really know what's available because I never come across that. I don't ever do. We have giant pumps on the dyno, so all of that is already cured for us. But you're looking at 2 or 3 like Hellcat pumps or something like that. Because I don't know how they package those, if they have, triple feeds. I know that on some of these way back when they were doing these dual pump and triple pump stuff, that they were Ying or T'ing all these together, and then they had a single outlet. I'm like, but it's restricted by the size of the single outlet. That's not a good thing. Twin Marlboro 450s. Yeah, that'll feed a lot. And on that note, it is time to go. Hopefully I'll be back tonight. You guys, if not, you guys have a good Friday and everybody stay safe out there. And hopefully I'll see you next time. I'm trying to work on another video.